Some great reporting from the Daily Poster. This was wow. When I saw this, I knew I had to do a story on this because this is just incredible, and I love getting these behind the scenes looks at what's actually going on in these companies, within these corporations. And obviously, we all know that these corporations hire lobbyists, but I think a lot of times it's not really highlighted how much of an influence that has on these politicians, right? Okay, so the headline reads, Fast food giant claims credit for killing $15 minimum wage. In internal company documents, a private equity-owned conglomerate is bragging to its employees about successfully blocking a boost in pay for low-wage workers. So, a lot of times we talk about, McDonald's workers or fast food workers when we're talking about the minimum wage, because a lot of the discourse is like, oh, should a person just flipping burgers, et cetera, be making all this much money? I'm making $17 an hour, et cetera, right? Of course, it's just bad arguments. You both should be getting paid more. You're both getting taken advantage of. But a lot of the discourses revolves around these fast food companies, even though it would, there's almost 40% of I think a little over 40% of the workers in like 2019, the study was done, were making minimum wage. So it's much more than just fast food workers. But the discourse is around these fast food companies a lot. And this is an actual inside view into what they're doing to prevent something like a $15 minimum wage, which we know, Brianna Joy Gray and Bad Faith Podcast went and talked to some of the union, the Amazon employees trying to form a union down there in Alabama. And he was saying Amazon goes around boasting it's $15 minimum wage as if it's not $30,000 a year, and it's still, we're barely scraping by here. What are they trying to do? Destroy us? What are they trying to do? Set us up for destruction? This is coming out of his mouth. Powerful, powerful words. And we still know that that's not enough. Even in Alabama, let alone, major cities, which is where there's a lot of a minimum wage job in major cities. So we know that's bare minimum. And even that, these fast food companies are like, no, it's too much. It's too much to take out of our billions and billions and billions of dollars of revenue every single year. Paying our workers $30,000 a year, around $32,000 a year with $15 minimum wage. Even that's too much. Even they don't even want to give you that much of an inch. And they're in the ears of the people that are in Congress making this legislation, forming these laws that we all have to live under. And so they're not listening to you, and when you call their office and, when you go and protest and et cetera, they're not listening to you when you do that. When that lobbyist who's funding his campaign, the lobbyist who works for the same company who is funding that politician's campaign, he's going to listen to that guy he's going to listen to that person over the people marching on the streets. And this gives us an inside look into that. And so I really appreciate original journalism like this. This is by Walker Bragman, Andrew Perez, and David Sirota. So let's take a look at it. I think it's definitely worth reading. Okay, so this report was written by Walker Bragman, Andrew Perez, and David Sirota. The parent company of some of America's largest fast food chains is claiming credit for convincing Congress to exclude a $15 minimum wage from the recent COVID relief bill, according to internal company documents reviewed by the Daily Poster. The company, which is owned by a private equity firm named after an Ayn Rand character, also says it is now working to thwart new union rights legislation. Wow. So, when they say convincing Congress, they mean they bought off Congress. They bought them off because the same companies that those lobbyists are paid by to lobby in Congress, those same companies donate to these politicians' campaigns. And the biggest signifier of who's going to win a campaign on average is who has more money. And so they don't have to go door to door knocking like a lot of people, the progressives in Congress who don't take corporate money. You have to go door to door knocking and actually talk to people and get them to give away their hard earned money. No. These politicians, these corporate Democrats, they don't do that. That's too hard. That's too difficult. That's too tough. What they're going to do is they're going to go to these massive corporations. They're going to fund their campaign coffers. Then they're going to win because they have 10 times the amount of money as their opponent. And Americans are so busy, and it's not really in our culture to pay attention to politics that much. So they're going to be like, okay, I heard this guy, this person who's running for Congress. I know their name. They sound nice. They say nice things. I'll vote for them. That's how it works. That's how it works. And so they're not convincing Congress. No, they bought Congress, and they're owed something now because they gave to those Congress people's campaigns and they funded them and they helped them win. Now they owe them something. That's how it works. That's how it works. These we see the corporation working, not even wanting to give $30,000 a year to their workers as they make billions and billions and billions of dollars in profits. Do you think that they're going to just be giving away money to politicians out of the kindness of their heart? No, no, they want something in return. So this is what we're seeing happen is they're lobbying on the inside. And this is how you get Democrats, who are supposed to be the working class party, voting against a minimum wage increase in 2021 when the minimum wage is $7.25. Are you kidding me? $15 is barely scraping by. $7.25. This is why people have to work multiple jobs. This is a reality. This is a reality in this country. The company boasts come just a few months after a government report found that some of its chains had among the highest percentage of workers relying on food stamps. We, as the taxpayers, are now funding these companies who are fighting against a minimum wage increase, which would affect their bottom line. We, the other taxpayers, now have to fund things like programs like food stamps, which these same workers rely on. So, the corporation is just getting off scot-free here. That's what this means. That's what this means. The corporation is getting off scot-free and everyone else is paying for it. This is how you grow inequality. And this is how it gets to this point. Inspire Brands, which owns Jimmy John's, Arby's, Sonic, and Buffalo Wild Wings, plus recently acquired Dunkin' Donuts for $11.3 billion in November. They're just growing a monopoly and nothing's being done about it. I don't hear pretty much anyone in Congress on the Democratic side talking about these mergers that are becoming just massive monopolies, as they also pay their workers so little that they have to rely on food stamps, which is funded by the rest of our taxes. Back to this article. This is just unbelievable. On Thursday, sent employees and franchisees a review of its government lobbying activity that highlighted its success in keeping the $15 minimum wage out of Democrats' American Rescue Plan. The American Rescue Plan. They lie just to keep it out of there. But don't worry, this American Rescue Plan is the best thing for fighting back against poverty, even though we won't raise your wages, which is the only permanent thing we could have done in this bill. The only permanent wage increase legislation that was in this bill, we made sure that was out of there. That Biden signed earlier this month. We were successful in our advocacy efforts to remove the Raise the Wage Act, which would have increased the federal minimum wage to $15 and eliminated the tip credit. Now, I'm not sure what the tip credit is, but I think that it must be something that they can take advantage of, the corporations. Further down, the report notes the company's ongoing lobbying campaign in the Senate against the PRO Act, which recently passed the House and contains a laundry list of organized labor's goals, such as eliminating right-to-work laws and banning mandatory company-sponsored meetings that are designed to discourage union activity. So I really want to know why anyone would think if something like the $15 minimum wage, which is extremely popular around the country, these lobbyists were able to pry 8 Democrats away from even considering it, from even voting on it. They voted against the motion to even vote on it. So they didn't even want to vote on it. We couldn't even get this, something that's extremely popular like that. And the lobbyists were successful in their advocacy efforts. Why do you think something like the PRO Act would be any different, considering how much work has been done to get people to not like unions in this country, to not understand how powerful a union can be? All the propaganda that has been waged, like the war that's been waged against labor. And so it's not nearly as popular. Something like the PRO Act is not nearly as popular because people, around the country either don't understand it, don't understand why these anti-union measures are so, have such adverse effects towards workers. Why do you think it would be any harder for the lobbyists to strike this down as well? Even if you got rid of the filibuster, which is where the conversation is. But we're talking about even if you get rid of the filibuster, you have lobbyists working, in the ear of people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema to get them to vote against these things, to vote with Republicans. So what do you think is going to be different is my question. That's my question. If you're employing the same tactics and you're not willing to force votes and stop up bills, and you're just relying on the kindness and the good heartedness of these people like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who instead of listening to their constituents, listen to corporate lobbyists that give them cash. They're not good people. So you can't rely on that. So you need a different strategy is what I'm saying. Because things like this are happening every single day in Washington, and it's keeping progress from happening. It's keeping the wealth inequality, growing and exploding to the point where people can't afford anything. The homeless population is exploding. This stuff is happening as these corporate lobbyists are lobbying, yes, Democrats, yes, they're lobbying Republicans, of course, but they ostensibly agree on a lot of things. But they're lobbying Democrats who are supposed to be the working class party against this stuff. So what do we think is changing? What's going to change between now and the next reconciliation bill that you think this same thing is going to happen if you try and get the $15 minimum wage in that bill? Even if it's a standalone bill and you get rid of the filibuster, what's going to stop things like this from happening? This is why you need to be aggressive. You have to have an aggressive approach. Because stuff like this happens behind the scenes all the time, and they're successful in their advocacy efforts. They're celebrating it. They're bragging to their shareholders. Back to the article. Under this proposed rule, franchisors could be considered the direct employer of the franchise owners in their. Okay, hold on. I think I skipped a little bit. Okay. Under this proposed rule, okay, no, I think I was right here. Under this proposed rule, franchisors could be considered the direct employer of the franchise owners in their system, as well as the restaurant workers those owners employ, taking away the independence of small business owners, the document said. You get the impression that they're actively spitting in our eyes, saying, yes, we worked to suppress wages of our employees, and we're just going to brazenly tell you, one Inspire Brands worker told the Daily Poster. I really do think that a line was crossed. You're just going to brazenly tell your employees, not only do we work to kill the wages, but going forward, we're also going to make sure the PRO Act doesn't pass either. They're going to do whatever they can to make sure they protect those sweet, sweet profits. Inspire Brands did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Of course not. Government report on low wages spotlighted Inspire Brands companies. During the 2020 campaign, Democrats pledged to raise the minimum wage to $50 an hour. Lied about that, which would boost the wages of 32 million workers nationwide, according to a recent report by the Economic Policy Institute. However, efforts to include $15 minimum wage in Biden's pandemic aid bill failed after the Senate parliamentarian advised Democrats such a hike should not be passed by budget reconciliation, and Vice President Harris declined to use her authority to override the decision. Advised, the fact that this is even mentioned as if this makes a difference. Just a fake obstacle the Democrats put in front of themselves to excuse them from actually doing a single thing to help to tangibly, and permanently help working class voters. Inspire Brands' success in eliminating the minimum wage hike from the bill follows Dunkin' Brands' then CEO Nigel Travis saying in 2015 that a $15 wage would be absolutely outrageous. At the time, unions noted that Travis was being paid more than $4,000 every hour, as he's saying a $15 minimum wage for his workers would be outrageous. This is how they think. These are the thoughts going through this man's head. And he thinks what he's saying is right. It makes sense because the people he's around, it does make sense to them. All the wealthy people that are in his circle, it makes sense to them that he can make $4,000 every hour and they're making $7.25. The minimum wage defeat also follows an October 2020 report from the Government Accountability Office finding that low-wage workers at Dunkin' Donuts, Arby's, and Sonic were among those relying most heavily on food stamps in states where those franchises operate. In 2019, some Sonic workers walked off the job in Ohio in protest of low pay. While paying many of its workers below $15, Inspire Brands franchises are generating $26 billion in annual revenue and enriching top executives. The founder of Jimmy John's, which has been accused of busting worker union drives, recently boasted on his website that he's named one of the planet's wealthiest men. This is the system we're living under. This is it. And these people are allowed to get anything they want. And their conduits are the Democratic Party as well as the Republican Party. Their conduits are both party. I mean, that's who both parties are legislating for. The fact that they didn't pass the $15 minimum wage shows that the Democratic Party listens to their corporate lobbyists over listening to their voters. There's nothing, it can't be more clear than that. In the year before Aspire acquired his company, Dunkin' Brands CEO was paid millions and then made millions more when the deal closed. In government filings this year, Dunkin' Brands warned investors about the prospect of low-wage workers being paid better. Warned investors, whoa, we're actually going to pay our workers a living wage. They will just be making barely enough to not starve after we increase their wage to just $15 an hour. And they're complaining, or they're warning investors that could happen. Well, it didn't, though. And it doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime in the near future, unfortunately. A significant number of our franchisees' food service employees are paid at rates related to the U.S. federal minimum wage and applicable minimum wage in foreign jurisdictions and passing, yada, yada, yada. Any increases in labor costs might result in franchises inadequately staffing restaurants. Why? You just made $26 billion in revenue. You're losing a few $1 billion every year paying these people slightly more. And you're saying, why would you inadequately staff the restaurants as a result of that? That doesn't not make any sense. The demand will be the same. So you're not going to inadequately staff your restaurants if the demand is there for more people to be there to help you function smoothly, and therefore people actually still want to come to your restaurant. So it doesn't even make sense. It doesn't even make logical sense. They just say it as if it's law, even though it's bullshit. But because they're some type of CEO, people they want you to think that they're actually intelligent. They're not.